Good afternoon. Welcome to the Microbrewery podcast, where we talk about trends going on in today's brewing industry world, ever-evolving brewing industry world. Today we have Meghan Connolly with the New York Brewers Association. Meghan, how are you doing today?
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me, Nathan.
Yeah, my pleasure. Meghan, can you share a little bit about how you got into your role and the brewing industry as a whole?
Yes, I'd love to. So I am the Director of Partnerships with the New York State Brewers Association, and I've been in this position for almost 9 years now, which makes me a bit of a veteran in the industry. And the way I got into this industry was first and foremost, I had a very deep passion, have a very deep passion for craft beer. I am a New Yorker through and through. And I had a traumatic life experience that made me reconsider my career choices. And I decided that I wanted to take the marketing skills and partnership development skills that I had acquired over a 20-year career and apply them to an industry that I was passionate about, that I thought could be a little more fun than what I had previously been doing. So at the time, the only staff person with the New York State Brewers Association was Paul Leone, the executive director. He's still the executive director. He had started about a year and a half prior to my cold calling him. And he said, well, I'm driving and I have 45 minutes. So who are you and what do you got? And I basically pitched my services of helping with marketing and, more importantly, with revenue generation, because the guilds across the country, most states have a guild or an association. They're 501c6s. And so therefore they are nonprofits and always looking for new ways of generating revenue so that they can better serve their brewery members. And I pitched a partnership program concept to Paul, and here we are almost 9 years later. So that's how I got into the industry. I knew I didn't want to work for a brewery at that time because it was a much smaller industry, and working for a brewery felt a little too confining for me. But on the state level, I could very much see how I could transfer my skills in supporting the craft beer industry.
So, with your comment about being with the brewery being too confining and you rather working um, with the New York Brewers Association as a whole, would you consider yourself a huge people person and talking with small and big group communities?
Well, I will say that I think a lot of the success we've had in New York is predicated on relationships. So in New York, the craft beer industry is a community that is comprised of breweries, as you would expect, and what we call allied partners. And the allies are businesses like DSP who are looking to do business with the breweries. And so our community is holistic in that if our partners are doing well because they're getting business from our brewery members, then those partners are more likely to support the guild, which in turn can better support the breweries to be more successful. And so it's a beautiful cyclical relationship. That's all, all stems from getting to know people, understanding their needs, creating custom packages and programs to meet those needs. So yeah, relationship building is a very key component to our success. And when I started with the NYSBA in 2014-ish, 15-ish, we were number 8 in the country. We had fewer than 150 breweries. Today we have 538, which puts us in the number 2 position in the country. I'm thrilled to say, and that's number 2 after California, which has about 1,100 breweries. So we're pretty solid in that number 2 position. And I really believe that the growth that we experienced in New York, which very much outpaced the national growth over a 5-year period, was largely because of the relationships we have with companies like yours that we're investing in this state. And we're seeing the potential here. And I always say there's still plenty of opportunity to go around here in New York.
Awesome. Well, kudos to you for being number 2. And
Thank you.
I've been with our company for about a year. So my first Brewers Conference, we went to one in Vermont. Then we went to New York after that, and I was very impressed with how organized your conference was in New York, and really easy to get around, but also a good pace for the seminars at the right time, and then for people to come meet the exhibitors as well. And very relaxed, but very had a lot of energy going on as well.
That's great. Thank you for that feedback. I really appreciate it. So the different guilds have different missions, if you will. They're all operated autonomously from one another with kind of different visions. Here in New York, we have a three-part vision. One is legislative, right? We are fighting against a bad political climate and working hard to embrace a positive one where our breweries can thrive and exist. That's the first piece. We don't have too much work in that area here in the state of New York compared to other states, so we're fairly fortunate. The second is in resources and education. That's where the conference primarily comes in, right? Brewery owners, operators, they're small business owners, they wear a million hats, they are stretched very thin. They don't have time to go out and research and dig for resources. So that's part of what I do in forming these relationships, is bring the resources to the brewery decision makers to make it as easy as possible for them. The third piece of what we do is advocacy and marketing. So we have a consumer-facing campaign called Think New York, Drink New York. Mm-hmm. We have consumer-facing festivals and a merchandise e-commerce campaign. And all of that is to raise awareness about our 538 breweries and to drive traffic to their tap rooms, right? So they get that D2C sale as opposed to the distribution. Here in New York, we were the first state to develop a consumer-facing app, which now has 60,000 unique users. So you can go on that app and track which breweries you visit. And leave comment. You can actually earn rewards too, which is kind of cool. It's like a passport program. You visit so many breweries, you get a free bag, I think is actually part of the program, the one hanging behind your head, the Think New York, Drink New York. So here in New York, it's three elements to our mission, if you will. It's legislative, advocacy, resource and education, and then promotions and marketing.
Nice. So speaking about the New York Brewers Conference, would you mind sharing a few takeaways from this year's conference, and as well as this year's recent CBC in Las Vegas?
Sure. Yes. So CBC, of course, is the National Craft Brewers Conference. It is absolutely incredible, with a wealth of information, both on the educational side and in their trade show, which has hundreds, I think 750 exhibitors. So you're really going to get a very good perspective of the country as a whole in the craft beer industry by attending CBC. They do a terrific job, and meeting people from other states, hearing their challenges, best practices in one state that may be relevant in your state. It's a very cool experience. Our state level conference is the second largest conference in the country after CBC. So the largest of its kind on a state level. We just had our 7th year of our conference, which is kind of amazing. First year we were revenue positive, but cash flow positive, but to watch it grow has just been awesome, with almost 700 attendees this year. And it's a little bit like a mini CBC, but instead of having that breadth of attendees, it's much more focused, and so it feels a lot more intimate. And you can say whether or not that was your experience, but it's more intimate conversations. You have more time to talk to people and get to know them on a personal level. And what we always advocate for our vendors and our attendees is we have built-in networking time. So after the trade show closes, there's formal networking, but then there's the informal, right? Then it's like meeting in the hotel lobby bar, or meeting in the city beer hall right next door. That time is critical, because you're relaxed and you're not necessarily in sales mode. You're just in talking, relaxing, hanging out, getting to know people mode. And those times are so critical in New York, in the New York market, in doing business here. It's not just about that transaction at the trade show. It's getting to know people, because ultimately you do business with people you like, right? It's not just about the cheapest price or the first search result on Google. It's, oh yeah, I met that guy. We had a beer together at the conference, and and staying top of mind, connecting that face to the company really goes a long way in New York State in terms of how to do business. So our show is fantastic. If you've never been, I highly recommend anyone watching this to attend our conference, because it really is a great mix of education and socializing and networking and resource acquisition. It's a great balance of everything, and it's a lot of fun. So it's March 19th through 21st, 2025 at the Albany Capitol Center in downtown Albany, New York. So if you've never been, I highly recommend it. But it is a little different feel, right, than the national. It's not as overwhelming, and it's a little bit more intimate. And I think it would make a lot of sense for companies to do both, which is, I understand, a big investment. So maybe you alternate. Maybe one year you go to the national CBC, and then the next year you focus on the more regional level. We absolutely understand that resources are finite, and choices need to be made. But hopefully we'll see. We always see a lot of returning people at our conference. It's nice to get some fresh energy, fresh blood in too, though.
Well, thank you for explaining a bit of the takeaways from both conferences this year. Moving forward, what unique strategies can microbreweries employ to help differentiate themselves in a crowded beer market as we see today?
Yeah. Well, my first thought is not specific to microbreweries. It's just business in general, right? I used to be a small business owner, so I understand on some level what it feels like to try and be attracting and retaining customers with a very small marketing budget. And the first thing that comes to mind is consistency. So brand consistency, right? The same logo, the same fonts on everything, on your website, on your social media, wearing branded attire any chance you get. These things are all free, right? You don't have to have a huge budget. But just being really consistent in how you present your brand visually is so important. Using the same color palette, using the same tone of voice when you're posting across social media platforms. Consumers hate to get confused. Absolutely. As soon as you confuse a customer, they're gone. So you have to make it very, very easy for them to identify your brand, to remember your brand, and to support your brand. You have to make it very easy. 30 years ago, I went to business school, and I remember at the time it was 7 touch points. Now it's 21. You need 21 touch points to get someone to remember you, which is crazy. The world is so cluttered. So even if it's minimal, just staying consistent with your tone and your visual brand is absolutely critical. That's advice across any business, any industry in the world. My second piece of advice has to do with translating the brand into a customer experience. Again, it goes back to confusion. So I was recently visiting a brewery where their logo was very kind of earthy, really reminded me of like resonating with like the outdoor enthusiast, the hiking community. It wasn't an urban environment, but like their logo really seemed to resonate with being on the edge of the Adirondacks, which is where it is. Well, then I get there and they have kind of oriental rugs, and then they have modern furniture, and it was a brand disconnect. I was expecting a physical environment that matched their logo, that had more of this kind of outdoor enthusiast vibe to it. And so that's jarring for your customers. And so anything you can do as a brand to really weave that through the entire customer experience. And I'll give you another example. There's a brewery that I like to frequent. Fantastic liquid, excellent beer. Everything they've ever made has been delicious. Their logo, fantastic. Their name, excellent. So you think, well, what could they be doing wrong? Food, fantastic, right? Like, what could they be doing wrong? and I don't know this for sure, I have not looked at their P&Ls, but my sense is that they don't understand who their core customer is, and therefore they're not speaking to that core customer. So they layered on the food, which feels like an afterthought. It's not really an integrated customer experience. And then they added TVs for Monday Night Football, which feels even more like a disconnect. And then they added in trivia and live, and everything just feels kind of like layered on top in almost like a sense of desperation, as opposed to feeling like this is one integrated experience that we are providing our customers. And so taking the brand at the core and then thinking that through, what is the ordering like? What does the menu look like? What does it feel like to sit there? Do you have different service options? Do you have high, some people don't like sitting at high tops, right? Because your legs kind of dangle, you don't feel supported. And so do you have different options? Do you have different zones? Here's a kind of an intimate area where people can sit and chat, and here's a place where people can eat, or, what is that experience like from start to finish? What are the bathrooms like? Are they unisex? Are they easy to find? What does the signage look like, right? That whole experience. And then I will take kind of a little bit of a detour here in your question, answering your question, to talk about accessibility. So 2 years ago at CBC, Bart Watson, who's the chief economist of the National Brewers Association, he spoke about breweries needing to be more creative in finding their customers and understanding who they are and in catering to their needs. And he didn't talk into specifics, but he was really inspiring breweries to say, we can't just rely on delicious liquid. We have to go out and actively recruit our customers. Well, I feel like one of the ways in which breweries can really do a better job, in addition to being more sustainable, but really focusing on accessibility, right? So because one in 4 adults in the US have a form of disability. And so if you're not making your brewery accessible, you are automatically cutting out 25% of your customer base, just right out of the gate, right? So to have unisex bathrooms, to have wheelchair accessibility, to have menus that are not only digital, but maybe you have some print menu, maybe you have some readers for the aging population. I was at a brewery recently. It was me and 5 of my friends. We're all in the same demographic, and I pulled my readers out of my bag. I was the only one with a set of readers. That pair of readers got passed around to all 6 of us so we could order our beers, right? But I've seen breweries go to the dollar store and get a basket and have those available on the bar to customers. Really, really easy steps that are not expensive that breweries can and should do to do a better job welcoming people with disabilities. Now, that's a huge thing, right? There's a huge spectrum of disabilities, and you can't be everything to everybody. But even just reaching out to a local disability group and inviting people and saying like, hey, what's your experience like? How can we make this better for you? Lighting is a big thing for people, right? Like too bright, too dim, can't read, noise control. I can't stand loud environments, not because I have a disability. I just can't stand it, right? And so like, what are you doing to create the most comfortable space possible for the broadest possible audience, while also remaining true to your core audience? It is tricky, but I really think that that's an area of improvement for a lot of breweries and a lot of opportunity too.
Yeah, add into your thoughts. There's a brewery in Columbus they're called Jackie O's, and it has an awesome outdoor space, dog friendly and kid friendly too. I'll probably say within the brewing industry years ago versus today, would you say it's becoming more family oriented?
That's a tough question because a little bit is geography. My brother's a big craft beer enthusiast. He lives on the West Coast. I'm on the East Coast, and I do feel like the West Coast breweries tend to be more family friendly than East Coast. But last summer I traveled in North Carolina for 2 weeks, and I found the majority of breweries to be very family friendly. So I think it's kind of regionally based. I know that both dogs and kids in breweries are both very controversial topics. If you follow craft beer professionals, every few months, there's a big conversation that percolates about one of those two issues. I'm not an animal lover, so I don't quite get the whole, need to bring your dog everywhere. However, if I'm a small business owner, I get the need to make my establishment as welcoming as possible to the broadest audience. Now with the dog, there are some concerns about safety, and you absolutely have to look into that, right? Of like, how can you invite customers with dogs in a safe way, because you also have other people there, right? So there are some concerns there, but in terms of being family friendly, I think it's an imperative, because we know that the demographic of craft beer enthusiasts is changing. When the New York State Brewers Association throws events, public facing events, our key demographic is early 40s. Those people have disposable income and usually kids. Mm-hmm. And so if we're not inviting their whole family, then we're cutting off our core segment of craft beer enthusiasts, right? So in looking at being creative and evolving with the changing demographic, my personal opinion is that breweries should certainly allow children. And what comes with that is making sure your aisles are wide enough for strollers, right? Strollers are not easy to wheel around, and make sure that you create an environment that's not too loud for little kids. Maybe you have certain snacks for the kids, like you give every kid that comes one of those free bags of goldfish crackers. Kids love goldfish crackers. And what does that cost you? 23 cents or something. But as the parent, you're like, oh, that's really nice that they just, gave that to my child to keep them entertained for 10 minutes so that I can have a beer. So those are controversial. Again, my personal opinion is breweries need to look at how they can be as welcoming as possible to all different types of individuals, whether it's the disability community or parents or, people who identify with different genders, whatever the case may be.
And before you wrap up, this is kind of like a tie-in or intro to our final question today. I noticed on your LinkedIn profile, you posted an article kind of talking about how advertising is done today, and how there's a tension between promoting economic growth versus sustainability. What struck a chord with you with that article?
So my background prior to craft beer was in the sustainability industry. And, the growth of craft beer for 10 years was so fast. And basically a lot of the breweries too are also young, immature, right? They're a handful of years old or younger. There's not a lot of breweries in the country that are 10 years old or more, right? And when you're young and you're struggling and you're kind of reaching, right? You're all over the place, again, wearing a million hats. Sustainability is typically not top of mind. And most people who get into the brewing industry don't have a sustainability background. So it's not organically baked into the DNA. But looking at it holistically as an industry, to the extent that our industry can take steps towards being more sustainable, is good for everybody, right? It's good for the community. It's good for sustainability. Good for the earth. Good for business. We do know that sustainability has very real business implications, meaning you can save a lot of money by being more sustainable. Which I think most people understand that, but years ago it was, we can't take these sustainability measures because they're too expensive. And I think people are more comfortable with the idea that, okay, that's not true. Being more sustainable doesn't necessarily mean more expensive. In fact, you can save a lot of money being more sustainable. And sustainability, like disability issues, is a huge spectrum. You can go from, serving napkins that are 100% post-consumer recycled to a massive wastewater treatment system in your facility, right? So there's lots of different areas around it. In general, I think the industry has a long way to go to embrace sustainability. There's small things happening like the reusable and recyclable pack tech holders, which can also be branded. So I like that from a marketing perspective. There's a couple wastewater companies that we work with, Econs and NRO being two of them. There's other companies looking at energy usage and introducing renewable energy to breweries. And there's some breweries doing absolutely incredible work, right? Sierra Nevada, Bench Brewing, right? Really, really cool stuff. To me, it's not just about like, okay, what can we do, right? And doing these massive things, but it's sharing what you are doing, right? Because when you communicate your positive practices, even if it's something small, what that does is makes your competitors and your customers take notice. And then what you see is this kind of upward movement. So for example, if Delta Airlines was like, okay, all of our seats and all of our planes, we're going to use vegan leather now. We're not ever going to use leather again. Well, that's going to make American Airlines, Spirit Airlines, Southwest, they're all going to question things, and they're not going to do the same thing because now Delta's doing it, but they're going to come up with something else that they can talk about from a sustainability perspective. And so that's how the industry as a whole kind of rises up. So I really believe that when you're looking at sustainability, it's not enough to do what you're going to do or do what you're doing, but it's that last piece of sharing why you're doing it and educating around it. I think like if a lot of breweries, they have employee uniforms, everyone on the team will wear a shirt with the logo, and that's cool. I would do the same thing if I was a brewery owner. But I think you could run different campaigns, right? Like for April, which is when Earth Day takes place, you could put a message on the back of the shirt. This is something like, this shirt is 100% is made from 100% recycled cotton. Happy Earth Day 2024, or something like that, right? Like, and I'm not saying that breweries need to always be educating, and again, you can't lose focus on your business and your customer base, but there's a really great opportunity to market something you're doing in a honest and true way. Definitely don't inflate anything you're doing because you're trying to get PR out of it, right? That's not what I'm suggesting. I'm just suggesting if your menus are printed on 100% post-consumer recycled paper, just put that on the menu, right? And maybe you do a post that's like, hey, here are some of the things we're doing that we're really proud of, and we're working on other ideas. What ideas do you have that we might be able to implement, right? And engaging your customers for ideas, letting them know what you are doing. It just shows you're thinking about it, right? No business, no person's perfect. We all have a long way to go when it comes to accessibility and sustainability. There's no expert necessarily in the matter, but to hear from other breweries what they're doing, oh well, that wouldn't be too hard for us to implement too. And there's some really, really innovative stuff on a high level that breweries can do. The best thing is when breweries are first in the planning stages to think about these things, right? It's very hard to add a family bathroom after the fact. But if you're working with an architect or a general contractor in the planning stage, right in that family bathroom, right? And same thing with sustainability. If you kind of bake it into the initial plans, the easier it is. It is very hard to implement change after the fact. People don't like change. And then it feels like a big, arduous project you just don't have the time for.
Well, definitely lots of great food for thought. Megan, I really appreciate you joining us on our show today.
Thank you.
I think definitely a lot of insights for myself and our viewers. And join us next time for our next episode on microbrewery marketing. See you next time.